In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. Whatever the virtues of the many fields of knowledge, all are steps on the path of omniscience. May these arise in the clear mirror of intellect. O Manjushri, please accomplish this. So, good evening. Welcome to this. What is the course title? Geez. Distinguishing appearances and their essence. Maitreya's Dharma Dharmata Vibhanga. So I'm excited about diving into this. I've had this on my shelves for many years and heard a lot about it. Recently, somebody said that it provides the ultimate view of the Mahayana and provides the link by presenting the view, sort of paving the way for the view into Vajrayana. And one of the aspirations of the Rimeshedra is to go through the five dharmas, as they're called, the five texts of Maitreya, as well as the five core texts of the Shedra curriculum, which include one of those five dharmas. And like most of these texts, this one is either deceptive, either completely simple and easy, or like very complicated when you really get into it. And so we'll try to proceed from the simple to the more complicated and just take it, take the syllabus of readings as like a guide or wish list and just pace ourselves however makes sense in terms of going through the material and digesting it and discussing it. And we've gone through in the Rimeshedra in the years past two of Maitreya's dharmas, the Abhisamaya Alankara, which is one of the five root texts of the Shedra curriculum in all schools, translated as the ornament of higher liberation, or higher liberation, which is an amazing condensation of the entire Prajnaparamita literature into about 25 pages, and has spurned numerous commentaries. And we touched on that a number of years ago, sort of opened the gate to that text years ago, and discovered the immense complexity hidden in those simple verses of that relatively short text. And we also went through a text, the Madhyanta Vibhanga, separating center from extremes, or middle from extremes, which refers to not falling into either extreme of existence or non-existence, of in terms of the view of things either existing or not existing. Whereas Abhisamaya Alankara condenses the Prajnaparamita and presents the path of the Bodhisattva in both great detail as well as a really complicated way of classifying the Bodhisattva path. And the Abhisamaya Alankara is the source of all the Lamrim literature, so famous in Tibet. In all lineages of Buddhism in Tibet, they all come from the Abhisamaya Alankara ultimately. And the Madhyanta Vibhanga was basically a Mahayana Abhidharma text. And here we have the Dharma Dharmata Vibhanga. So the term Vibhanga means separating or distinguishing or differentiating two different things. And here we're differentiating Dharma from Dharmata. So Dharma is used in the sense that it's used in the Sautrantika tradition, which is a scheme of 75 dharmas that includes, that are sorted into five categories: matter, primary mind, secondary mind. Sorry, primary mind are the six consciousnesses, secondary mind are the mental factors, and then non-associated formations, phenomena such as time and birth and aging that don't fall into either matter or mind, and then uncreated dharmas, nirvana, cessation. So dharma in that sense is, in the sense of this title is, sorry, dharma in this title is used in the sense of what's the nature of relative phenomena. And then dharmata is the suchness, the essence of reality. So distinguishing the essence of reality from its relative phenomenal appearance. And this text has a bit of an interesting story behind it, the history of it. And I thought Trongor Rinpoche. So there's a number of different translations of this text at this point into English, with varying levels of commentary on them. And I chose the one by the Padmakara Dharma Chakra Translation Committee, which has a very nice cover and is a very small size. I thought that's great. Let's see, now it's a small, short book. We can just do that. And then I discovered that Karl Brunholzel's book, Mining for Wisdom Within Delusion, has such helpful material in it. So, unfortunately, instead of there being just one book, I've extracted a bunch of material from Carl's book, which happens to be tiny for Carl, right? This is a very short book for Carl Brunholzel. Usually his books are like these massive tomes. And then also the introduction by Trongor Rinpoche to this text. And so we'll go through those bit by bit. I have put them together in a source book. If anyone wants the compiled version, I have to send these to Morgan to post on the site. But the compilation that compilation is better if you're going to print it and you like printing things and reading them on paper. Whereas if you're going to use them digitally, I'll circulate each text as we come to it digitally, and they're larger. They appear larger on screen than the versions in the source book. But I'll share the link to all of these. So I thought we could dive into Trongor Rinpoche's introduction, which I found fascinating. So it comes from this. Hopefully you all have it. I sent that around. I can also screen share it. Distinguishing Dharma and Dharmata and so the authorship of this text in this version is given as Asanga and Maitreya, which right away is an interesting little piece of information. It's like, did they write it together? Legendary version of this text is that Maitreya spoke these texts, or maybe transmitted them psychically into Asanga's mind, and then Asanga wrote them down. And we'll come to the little story of that in a minute in this introduction. There's a commentary on it by Trungpa Rinpoche, the highest ranking type of geshe. He um, also became a geshe in the Gelugpa tradition, whereas Kagyu equivalents are usually called kenpos, translated by a member of our community named Jules Levinson. So, the meaning, beginning with the meaning of the title, this text is an exposition of the Dharma Vibhanga in Sanskrit, or distinguishing Dharmata in English. The word Dharma means phenomena, Dharmata means pure phenomena. So, I had said the essence of Dharma, the true nature of reality, and when we talk about the true nature of reality, we always have, or might have, this question of like, are there actually discrete entities that are truly existent phenomena, pure phenomena? Like, is there some group of those, like the 75 dharmas, or is it the true nature that resides, so to speak, within each dharma, or pervades all of space? And that is a fundamental question. Like, what is dharmata, and how does it relate to dharma as it's understood in this tradition? This treatise, or shastra, so shastra, Sanskrit word meaning the commentaries on the sutras. So when we talk about texts by Nagarjuna, Asanga, and so forth, these are referred to as shastras. It was given by the regent of the victorious one, Maitreya. So the regent, he's the next Buddha. He's on the 10th Bodhisattva ground, and he's waiting in the batter's box, so to speak, up in Tushita heaven, uh, preparing for his last rebirth, during which he'll achieve complete, perfect Buddhahood and turn the wheel of the Dharma, as has been foretold in a number of sutras, that he will do it in a certain way, in a certain aeon, and so forth. And just one little tidbit is that all the Buddhas gain enlightenment at Bodh Gaya in India, of all aeons in this world realm. They like that spot. They call it the Vajra seat. The Maitreya texts are important to Buddhist texts, I guess, of the middle way, Madhyamaka, and learned scholars of India and Tibet have debated the meaning of these texts in great deal and at length. The meaning of these texts is somewhat controversial, because they go quite a bit further in describing um, or presenting a view of reality, a view of the Dharma that goes quite a bit beyond what we know of as Madhyamaka, in terms of which generally focuses on the absence of entityness in all phenomena, and makes a point of sort of stopping there and not presenting any alternative to the absence of essence. How it was written, there was a Tibetan scholar named Kongat Sultram who wrote a book in which he argued this text did not come from the Buddha Maitreya, but a human being whose name was Maitreya Anatta. So Anatta means, it's an epithet, a reverend, or uh, exalted Maitreya. And so Trungpa Rinpoche is immediately entering into the discussion, this controversy around the authorship of these texts. Was Maitreya an actual being? Is not considered by the legendary so-called tradition of Buddhism to have taken birth, but in this realm, but to be living for a very long time in this realm called Tushita, which is the highest realm of the desire realms, from which he will take. I think he's. There's two Tushitas, and I keep messing this up. I think he's in the Buddha realm, Tushita, and when he then takes, in order to take birth in the human realm, he first takes birth in the highest realm of the desire realm, and then takes birth in the human realm. But that's a detail that we don't have to concern ourselves with. He'll work that out, I think. So somebody he's bringing up this issue right away, that some people think Maitreya was not, the author is not the future Buddha, but just was a person who had that name, Maitreya, and a Sangha received this text from him. My own opinion is simply that this person, meaning Kanga Sultram, is overly involved, with logic and has no confidence in Dharma, and no confidence in the existence of the pure realm of Tushita, where a Sangha received Maitreya's teachings. So he wrote this from the point of view of having little faith and confidence in the Dharma. However, Maitreya did give these texts directly to a Sangha. He taught them explicitly, and that is well known to a great many Panditas and Siddhas who have also received such a direct transmission of knowledge. So this tradition of sort of receiving terma, which is basically the way it's portrayed in the Tibetan tradition, receiving teachings directly from prior great teachers of the Buddhist tradition in visionary encounters. And in the Tibetan tradition, we have a huge amount of literature of that type, and an amazing diversity of the various types of that sort of literature. Some being what they call pure vision, where it's just you receive it into your mind stream. Some called mind terma, where it appears in your mind stream. The difference between those two is vague, but then there's earth terma, that is actually physical texts that are found, that were planted by beings in the past before the time of the discoverer. The Garjana is considered to be basically the first Tirtan, when he retrieved the Prajnaparamita Sutras from the Naga king underneath a huge lake in southern India, upon whose shores upon which shores he was teaching the Dharma. And Maitreya and Sangha continue in that tradition. In fact, the Sangha went to the heaven of Tushita and received this text from Maitreya directly. So I don't think he received a physical text, but at the time of Asanga, the principal place for the study of Dharma in India was the Nalanda Monastic University. This is a little bit problematic because historically, Nalanda is not considered to have flourished until I think sometime later than the life of Asanga. But basically, Tibetans put every great Indian scholar, practitioner in Nalanda University. Say all of the great ones, they had to be in Nalanda. Nagarjuna was at Nalanda and so forth. Whereas if you look up Nalanda, I think it has a little bit of a later time stamp from the historical point of view. Anyway,
Well, that's because the first one burned, as he said. So how would you know? It burned.
a short time previous to his birth, a great fire had broken out and destroyed many books, in particular the texts of Abhidharma. It was not possible to repair the damage. That's great. Right away, so a nun called or named Sawate Sultram thought, I won't be able to refurbish and spread this teaching by myself. It's these cool stories of how this nun that's there takes it upon herself to, I'm going to restore the Dharma. But I can't do it myself. I could, however, give up the nun's life and give birth to sons. What an innovative idea. I'm going to have some children, and they're going to help me do this. It's not that different from a lot of people these days who build their corporate empires and they have children whom they expect to help them with that. and give birth to sons who would be able to study these teachings that would allow for the restoration of the Abhidharma. So they focus on Abhidharma as like the pinnacle of the Dharma, which initially in the early tradition, Abhidharma was considered to be the pinnacle of the Dharma teachings of the Buddha. The Vinaya was essential as the code, monastic code, and the sutras were the discourses, the teachings that the Buddha gave to thousands of different people on diverse subjects. But the Abhidharma was a condensation of all those teachings into an amazingly structured system that gave one the ability to understand clearly the Buddhist view of reality of individuals and um, our environment and the path to enlightenment. So she did so. She gave up her nun's life and gave birth to two sons. I guess in between, unstated here, is she connected with another human being of the male sort and gave birth to two sons, a Sangha whose family came from royalty. So his father was royalty, and Vasubandhu, whose father came from the Brahmin caste, which was the highest caste in the Indian caste system, higher than royalty. So, two different fathers. These brothers spread the Buddhist teaching widely, and in particular, teachings of Abhidharma according to the tradition of the time. A son took up the work that one's father had done. That was the tradition. You would do what your dad did. There was no agonizing search for what am I going to do in life. It's a very much simpler time in a lot of ways, obviously, and less anxiety, but much less freedom. At a certain point, the two sons of the former nun asked her, "Who are our fathers? What work do they do?" So presumably she raised them as a single mom. "We want to prepare for the work our fathers do." The mother replied, "Taking up the livelihood of your father is not the purpose of your being here. I'm going to tell you your purpose. Forget that other stuff. The purpose of you being here is to train in the Abhidharma teachings. You better do a good job. A great deal of harm has come to these teachings and been damaged and have practically disappeared, so they won't disappear completely. You need to study and teach them. That's why you're here. That's why I gave birth to you." Sort of funny thing for your mom, like at some point to reveal, okay, this is your job. This is why you exist. The younger son Vasubandhu went to study with Kashmiri teacher named Ginen Salmo. So Trungpa Rinpoche gives all the Tibetan version of these names, which would not have been in Tibetan, and received the teachings on the Abhidharma, the lesser vehicle, or the Hinayana, which now is called the Theravada tradition. A little bit of a typo there on Theravada. There's also the greater vehicle, or Mahayana, and the views and teachings of the Mahayana go further. For that reason, the elder son of Sangha practiced meditation diligently, trying to meet Maitreya, so he would be able to spread those very profound teachings of the Mahayana. He succeeded and was able to return to the central country, the sort of heartland of India, the place where everything happens, and spread the teachings there, whatever that meant. The two sons did what their mother ordered them to. A Sangha went into retreat and practiced for 12 years to achieve direct transmission from Maitreya. So those of us who have heard this story of Maitreya, of its Sangha's retreat, we've uh, we've probably encountered, most of us have encountered this story before. And what we don't really think about, probably, at least I didn't until recently, is that why would he do this a retreat about Maitreya? His mom didn't say, like, I want you to resurrect the Dharma, the Abhidharma of Maitreya. But there must have been like some movement at that time about the Bodhisattva Maitreya as becoming like a really important figure. So a Sangha lives around 250 of the Common Era. Nagarjuna was about 150, if you accept the historical dating. And the Prajnaparamita Sutras, um, Nagarjuna recovers them, but from the historical record, they actually start appearing 200 years before Nagarjuna. And so in those sutras, you have the bodhisattva ideal highlighted in a big way and presented as an option for everybody, which is radical uh, renovation, radical change from the earlier tradition, which basically was like there's one Buddha every aeon, and your highest hope is to become an arhat. And gradually that shifts with the appearance of these sutras. And so there must have been like this gradual development of, okay, we can all become bodhisattvas and future Buddhas, and therefore we should probably connect with the next Buddha because he's doing what we want to do, and we should like sort of grab onto his robe, euphemistically, and follow him. So he does a retreat, and he says, I'm going to do a retreat for 12 years. To connect with Maitreya. And during these years, he endured much hardship. As you can imagine, a retreat in those days must have been even harder than it is today. And on several occasions, he becomes discouraged and lost confidence and broke his retreat, only to return again. So he doesn't go into the detail of it, just very simply that. But the legendary story is that he gives up every 3 years and he leaves this retreat. And as he's leaving his retreat, each time he sees this scenario that Maitreya has emanated to give him, to restore his confidence in his retreat practice. And the first time he sees um, an old man sitting next to a huge pile of needles, and he has rocks. There's a pile of rocks on one side and needles on the other side, and he's taking these rocks and he's rubbing them with a cloth. And the song says, "What are you doing?" He says, "Look, I'm making needles out of these rocks." And the song says, "Oh my God, if this guy can have the patience and perseverance to do that, I can go back into retreat for a few years." And so that repeats 2 more times at 6 years and 9 years. And I think at 12 years, he finally says, okay, that's it. I made a commitment for 12 years. I haven't seen Maitreya. I give up. And he leaves. And on his way out, he comes across a dog that's in very bad physical condition lying on his path with his gaping wounds with maggots all over it. And the song is like, oh my God, I got to help this dog. This dog uh, needs help badly. And so he kneels down, he inspects the dog. He's like, how can I do this? And he says, I got to clean up this wound here, but I don't want to kill these maggots that are crawling on him in the act of trying to help this dog. So I got to put the maggots on something where they'll still be alive. So he says, okay, I'm gonna I'm gonna slice off a good slice of my own skin from my arm, and I'll put the maggots onto my skin, and then they can continue eating and living on my own skin that I'll leave here and take them from the dog. But and he does that, and he cuts this strip of his arm off his flesh. And then he says, "Well, how am I going to get these maggots from the dog onto my flesh? If I like push them or scrape them, they're going to die." So he figures, I'll go down and use my tongue and I'll lick them off. Just we would all do the same, I'm sure, right? He goes down to lick the maggots off with his tongue to then place them on the strip of his own flesh. And as he does this, he bends down. He closes his eyes because it's so disgusting, and he never finds the dog. His tongue never meets the dog, but instead the dog. So he opens his, like hits the ground or something. And he opens his eyes. The dog's not there anymore, and instead there's Maitreya. Finally, and the song is like, "Holy shit! I've been practicing for 12 years." And finally, you grant me a vision of yourself. Like, why for 12 years did you make me suffer for. So the funny part of that story is he immediately starts complaining to Maitreya. Maitreya says, come on, come on, come on, calm down. You didn't have enough compassion until this point, and now you've clearly demonstrated your compassion is ripe, and uh, now you're able to receive my teachings and present them and propagate them in the world. Anyway, so Maitreya takes him to Tushita and gives him teachings there, and he listens to these oral teachings, and Sangha receives what are known as the five works, and this is one of those five texts. Tibet was renowned throughout the world as being the home of the secret Vajrayana teachings, which are similar to the Vajrayana teachings. Interesting that it says similar. However, not only was the Vajrayana taught, but the Mahayana Dharma was also studied and practiced extensively. This is a good point that I just want to chime in on. That a lot of people have a lot of inspiration and excitement about practicing Vajrayana, but it's really good to continue to study and practice Mahayana at the same time. We should all consider that, I think. With the Vajrayana being widely practiced, meditation was also practiced. There were two traditions, Mahamudra and Dzogchen. It's the sutras of the teachings of Buddha and the Shastras, or commentaries that were composed in India by the great scholars and accomplished persons. That's an odd sense. In order to achieve this very high view of Mahamudra and Dzogchen, one needs to cut through. Am I missing something? Cut one's own doubt in order to eliminate hindrances of not falling into various sorts of errors or aberrations. So, in order to genuinely and validly practice and understand Mahamudra and Dzogchen, one needs to have cultivated a very subtle and profound understanding of the view of the Mahayana. Essential. Otherwise, one is so much as doing exercises. What helps one eliminate one's doubt, hindrances, and errors is to listen to and contemplate the Mahayana Dharma. Just studying and understanding the Dharma Mahayana is not enough. In addition, we need experience of meditation to truly realize it. True realization requires the oral instructions of Mahamudra or Dzogchen or whatever tradition, and without these it's impossible to achieve the profound experience and completion of Mahamudra and Dzogchen in a rapid manner. Therefore, an introduction to Mahamudra or Dzogchen, such as this text provides, is of great importance. When it came to practice, the practice of the Panditas, the adepts, was that of the secret Vajrayana. However, the teachings they heard and thought about were those of the Mahayana. Therefore, we need to listen to and contemplate the Mahayana. The actual words spoken directly by the Buddha were recorded in the sutras and commentaries called Shastras, were composed by scholars on the meaning of those sutras. Of those two, the treatises or Shastras are more important. Isn't that an interesting statement? Between the sutras that record the words spoken directly by the Buddha and the commentaries called Shastras, the commentaries, the Shastras, are more important. Many do not share the Tibetan belief that the Shastras to be more important by saying, because after all, the root of the Buddha's tradition is the Buddha himself, and therefore one ought to take his words, the sutras, to be the main material to be studied. However, the reason commentaries are of great importance in the sutras is that the Buddha presented the teachings like this. A student would come to him and ask him a question, the Buddha would give a reply. Some pupils came to the Buddha within faith, devotion, intelligence, desire to practice, and asked their questions from that point of view. Others had little faith, devotion, or great yearning for the Dharma, and would ask questions, and Buddha would give different answers to those students according to their attitude or disposition. Right? If somebody's there just like for to debate with the Buddha, he's going to get a very different response from the Buddha than somebody who's there genuinely, who wants to become enlightened and released from suffering. Thus, with the Buddha's speech, there is the definitive teaching and there is the provisional teaching, or teachings that would require interpretation. So the teachings that were given to various people on different occasions based on their situations is called the provisional. It's provisioned. It's it's occasioned specifically for those individuals and doesn't apply universally to everyone. Whereas within his multitude of teachings, there are definitive teachings that do apply to everyone. And so one of our tasks as Buddhists on the path is to separate the definitive teachings from the provisional and understand what are the universal teachings that the Buddha gave, the most important ones that lead to liberation. If the Buddha were to give those without much faith and devotion, definitive teaching, they wouldn't have confidence in it. It's too profound, they wouldn't get it. So he gave them something else to think about rather than giving them the actual or definitive. He gave them the provisional teachings that sort of lead one into the Dharma, as opposed to teachings that lead one along the path. So if we were to read the sutras directly, we would make the mistake of taking a definitive teaching for being provisional or vice versa. We would not know how to sort them out and figure out which one is which. But fortunately, after the Buddha's presentation, many scholars with their higher prajna, their own experience, understood which from among the teachings were definitive and which were provisional, and they wrote treatises differentiating those two types of teachings. And this is the reason why the Shastras are more important than the Sutras. Also, the Sutras are voluminous and contain numerous repetitions and references to different individuals that the Buddha met and teachings geared specifically for those individuals, whereas the Shastras collate all the meaning, all the teachings of the sutras and present them in an organized manner as ground, path, and fruition. And there are two types of shastras, the what we normally call shastras, and then there's oral instructions. So shastras as written text, and then oral instructions that support those. The shastras themselves approach various topics through reasoning and explain in detail and with great clarity topics such as the five aggregates, the 12 sense fields, and the 18 elements, collectively known as the three skills of the Abhidharma. These topics are principally presented in long analytical treatises. The oral instructions, however, tell one how to practice by presenting instructions in a brief way. Of these two, the Shastras and the oral instructions are the more important. So there's, throughout the history of the Dharma, there's this process of distilling the voluminous teachings of the Dharma into more and more concise and applicable or teachings appropriate to the time period and the peoples of those time and their situations. Among the 5 books, 4 are classified as Shastras proper, and 1 falls into the class of oral instructions. The 4 that are Shastras are extensive. They're longer. They are the ornament for clear realization, the Abhisamayalankara, which I spoke about earlier, which is not that long. It's like 25 pages. The ornament of the Mahayana Sutras, which is a large text that's a collection of excerpts from numerous sutras arranged according to a complex structure of topics, distinguishing the middle and the extremes, not a very long text, and the changeless continuum, the Uttara Tantra, which is actually probably the longest. The present text, distinguishing Dharma and Dharmata, is very brief and direct in its presentation and is considered to be an oral instruction as opposed to a Shastra proper. Interesting distinction that this text is of a different nature from the other 4 of the 5 dharmas of Maitreya, and that it's actually a practice-oriented text. Thus, for those who have faith and are exerting themselves, the oral instructions are more important than shastras. This text is an oral instruction because in the practice of shamatha vipassana of Mahamudra Dzogchen, it is vipassana or insight meditation that is mainly discussed and focused on. In these meditations, we're introduced to the true nature of the mind, and we reach Buddhahood in Mahamudra Dzogchen by abandoning the disturbing emotions, by examining mind directly, focusing on the mind. In the sutra teachings, this profound nature of the mind is spoken of as dharmata, or nature of phenomena. So I said incorrectly, I said this profound nature of the mind. So there's the profound nature of reality. In Mahamudra and Dzogchen, they focus, or we focus, on the profound nature of the reality of the mind, whereas in the sutra, the focus is on the profound nature of the nature of phenomena in general. The secret specialty of the Vajrayana is that we focus directly on the mind itself as the source of everything. In the context of mantra, it is called Sem, or the mind nature, distinguishing it from the nature of phenomena. It is just this nature of phenomena, or mind's nature, that is to be known. It's essential to understand the nature of the mind. One must understand this through hearing and thinking about it. Nevertheless, ordinary people are not able to realize it directly because one is obstructed by conventional appearances. Due to those, one is not able to realize Dharma nature, mind nature. If one is able to realize this nature, this profound nature, then one will naturally separate from these confused, concealing, or conventional sorts of appearances. Thus, this text, distinguishing Dharma and Dharmata, is devoted to identifying and distinguishing just exactly what the conventional appearances or conventional truth are, and just exactly what the ultimate truth, the nature of phenomena, or the ultimate enduring condition is. So this treatise is extremely important for those who wish to practice the meditations of Mahamudra and Dzogchen. This book was composed many generations ago. For this reason, if one just picks it up and try to understand it, it's pretty difficult. After all, it's rather dissimilar from the kinds of books we're familiar with in the present time, and that makes it difficult to understand. However, given that the teaching was presented by a great bodhisattva, it's not incomprehensible, and there's great benefit from having understood it. So rather, if we put forward exertion and approach it with longing and respect, we can indeed understand it. So it's a complicated text, Trungpa Rinpoche is telling us, but if we have the proper attitude, we can actually gain understanding from it, and it's well worth it. Particularly those in Western countries have trained from a very young age in a variety of studies that develop their intelligence and ability to reason well. Therefore, you will be able to understand this text clearly. Having understood it clearly, having developed confidence in what you understood, if you then bring that into your practice of meditation, it will bring great benefit. This point that he's making is that compared to most people in Tibet and maybe some other Eastern countries, but his experiences from Tibet, Westerners are very highly educated compared to Tibetans. Most Tibetans historically would not go to school. Generally, one child in a family was sent to school at the nearest monastery until like 8 years old, and then they would return to the family to work in the whatever the family did, generally farming of some type. So when they come to the West, they see that everybody is so educated, so well educated and intelligent. It really makes a big impression on the Tibetan teachers. Understanding this text will be beneficial to those who have not yet given birth to meditation by arousing a desire to meditate. And I think what he means not really is like those who don't meditate at all, but really like those of us that don't quite get it in our meditation. Like, what are we meditating on? Once we establish a similitude of shamatha, what is vipassana? Vipassana is meditation on the view. So it's essential to understand what is the view that we then bring into our meditation in order to, as he put it above, separate from conflicting emotions and incorrect ways of thinking about our world. For those who have already have these qualities, it will allow them to increase. Therefore, it will be beneficial and extremely important. So just to go through a little bit more, in the past, the homage to Shastras would be to Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So most texts uh, have a homage at most Buddhist, almost all Buddhist texts start with a homage, and generally it's to the Buddha or Bodhisattvas. If the text concerned the Vinaya monastic discipline, one would say prostrate to the Omniscient One. Texts concerning the Abhidharma would say prostrate to Manjushri. Later translators departed from this tradition on this particular occasion. The homage is to Maitreya. Somebody says later translators. I think he means later scholars, later practitioners like Asanga. Now, it's a little bit odd for Maitreya to be bowing to himself. So it leads one to have this complexity about, like, who wrote this? Or is maybe the homage is not actually part of the main text, not a major quandary that would keep us up at night. Expression of homage is also related to the time in which the text was translated, although all of the 5 books of Maitreya appeared in the world at the same time. So Asanga's dates are the 4th century CE. So 4th century is the 300s, and I said 250. So maybe maybe he was born in like 275 and then like came of age in the 300s, somewhere in that range. These 2 of the 5 texts distinguishing Dharma Dharmata and Uttara Tantra, which is the commentary and the commentary on that were composed by Sangha, were concealed as treasures. So in the historical record, we see that of these 5 texts, there were numerous commentaries written on the other 3 throughout the historical record since their composition in the 3rd century. Whereas these 2, distinguishing Dharma Dharmata and Uttara Tantra, we don't see commentaries on them until like the 11th century. And so there's this story that these texts were hidden because they were so advanced, and so this was because their meaning was very profound. It was felt that these texts were not entirely suitable for these times, for those times. So the premise is that a Sangha decided to hide these 2, or somebody shortly after him. And then Maitripa, who's one of the main progenitors of the Mahamudra tradition in Tibet, who lives about the same time as the great master Naropa, about 1000 of the Common Era, saw light issuing forth from a crack in a stupa. From that light, he saw that there was something very special inside, so he pulled out these texts, these 3 texts. So he visits a stupa in somewhere in northern India and sees this story. This is the story. And so he reveals these texts and then begins to widely disseminate them into northern India and then from there into Tibet. Just a brief statement, little summary of like what's the purpose. Something there is to be given up by fully is to be given up fully through knowing, and something else which can only be actualized. Not the easiest English to parse, but something there is to be given up fully through knowing. So there's certain obstructions to enlightenment that are overcome through understanding, through knowledge, through wisdom. We say there's 2 obscurations to enlightenment. One is the cognitive obscuration of believing things to exist the way they appear, and that is overcome by knowing the true nature of reality. And something else which can only be actualized. And then there's the klesha varna, the negative propensities of karma and klesha that can only be overcome by treading on the path, practicing the path, and gradually assimilating the knowing into one's being until it pervades our being entirely. And the way that process is described is that at first we dwell in ultimate reality while we're in meditative equipoise. And then when we leave meditative equipoise, we experience reality again based on our habitual pattern without the mistaken presumption that it exists. But still, those patterns are perpetuated. And then it takes a very long time to wear out those patterns, which is what the author is calling being actualized, because of which this treatise has been composed, the wish to distinguish the traits defining these. So, purpose of this treatise is to identify and clarify these two obstructions to enlightenment and how to work with them. He says, Maitreya gives the reason for writing this. One must understand what is called that which possesses the quality, that which possesses the Dharma. An odd phrase, that which possesses the quality, is archaic way of saying that which possesses the nature of Dharma. The quality to which this refers is the Dharmata itself, suchness, translated here as subjects, but it means those which bear the quality of Dharma. Phenomena, subjects, which bear the nature of reality, of Dharmata. Those are the subject matter. The subjects themselves are samsaric confused appearance or samsaric confusion, and they need to be abandoned. So this is a somewhat confusing or convoluted way of saying that these two natures are present in the same locus. It's not like there's phenomena that are dharmata on the one side and phenomena that are dharma on the other side, but all phenomena, which are the subjects that we're going to talk about, have a confused appearance, and yet they bear the quality of dharmata at the same time. And so we abandon the confused appearance. What is the method for abandoning it? Is through recognizing, which is the understanding, and then understanding the enduring condition, the true nature of the way in which phenomena actually exist. That must be known manifestly or completely. Thus it is for the purpose of abandoning confusion and realizing the non-confused state this treatise has been composed. One must understand the distinctive character of confused appearances. So in order to do this, in order to understand the enduring condition, we have to understand the way the way that phenomenal appearance is distorted, is a distortion of the true nature of reality. And we must also understand the nature, the character, the conditions, and the excellent qualities of that true nature in order to progress along this path. And so that's the general scheme of the Dharma and the Buddhist tradition in general. There was one Q&A, a couple of Q&As that are worth touching on. The 5 texts of Maitreya are divided into mind only and Madhyamaka. Where does this text fit in, and what is the characteristic to put it into that category? There are many different ways of explaining the 5 books of Maitreya in terms of the various philosophical schools in the Indian Buddhist tradition. Some say that all 5 books are texts of the mind-only school. So the classification of these 5 texts is a phenomenally contentious project in the Tibetan tradition. So certain traditions, i.e. the Gelugpa tradition, basically consider, the Gelugpa tradition doesn't consider all 5, but some traditions consider that all 5 Dharma texts, 5 Dharmas of Maitreya, are mind only. Some say that the ornament of realization is the text of the middle way or Madhyamaka school, and that the other 4 are mind only. That's the standard Gelugpa view, is that of the 5, one of them is Madhyamaka, and that's the ornament for clear realization. Some say that the ornament plus the Uttara Tantra are texts of the Madhyamaka. So he's going to go through the various elaborations of this. Um, and there's a great many ways of talking about this. However, in terms of joining this to meditation and practice, it's necessary to settle appearances, to resolve that appearances are just mind, and that mind itself is empty, and to realize emptiness in meditation. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Those are the four pointing outs in the Mahamudra tradition, right? And this is these four stages are the stages of Vipassana in the Mahayana system, starting with the Lanka Avatara Sutra, Nagarjuna, and Kamalashila, Atisha, and so many other texts. Appearances are mind. Mind is empty. Emptiness is spontaneously present, is captured in realizing emptiness in meditation. And the force pointing out in the Mahamudra tradition is spontaneous presence is self-liberated. Even if one's view is that of the Madhyamakas, nevertheless necessary to settle such appearances as being just mind. So regardless of, um, so not regardless, let me take that back. Whatever way one looks at this, one has to understand that appearances are mind. Appearances are what appears to a mind. This is not Chittamatra. It's also Madhyamaka. Is that what appears to the mind are appearances. We can't say what there is that appears. All we know is that there's appearances that appear, that are what appear to the mind. If one were to say that this mind, that this stuff of these appearances were truly existent or truly established, that would be the Chittamatra view. So the Chittamatra view makes the erroneous assumption that, okay, this mind is truly established. And these are the appearances of the truly established mind. However, there isn't any place in the five books of Maitreya where it is said that this mind, having settled that all appearances are just mind, that then says that this mind is truly existent or truly established. So, in some traditions, these five dharmas, these five texts are looked at as the source of the Chittamatra tradition. However, there's nowhere in these texts where it says that this mind um, is truly existent or truly established. Later authors who don't explain these texts correctly do make such statements, and on the basis of that, other scholars then say, well, it started in the five books of Maitreya. But if you look very carefully, they do not make that mistake. Later authors do. Thus, from that point of view, it can be said that all of them are texts in the middle way, and in particular, from among them, the Uttara Tantra, the Peerless Continuum, and this text is present the view of the Zhentong, or empty of others school, which is an interesting statement by Trungpa Rinpoche. So, in Tibet, there's two divisions of Prasangika, Madhyamaka. One is Rongtong and one is Zhentong. And he's saying that this text and the Uttara Tantra are the essential presentation of the Zhentong tradition because they teach the Sugatakarbha, the essence of the one, gone to bliss, in detail. Uh, they teach it as the ultimate truth, whereas in other traditions, the Sugatakarbha is a provisional teaching and not a definitive teaching. How Maitripa got the mind teaching from this? Maitripa found found was an actual book. It wasn't offered to him by the Dakinis. This is an odd response, as if Maitripa Maitreya discovered these texts later on, right, in the 11th century. It's not a term that was given to him by a vision or a Dakini or whatever. Was it Maitreya himself who wrote this text? He says, no, it was a Sangha. I thought that was the funniest thing because it's totally confusing. Because generally, and earlier he said Maitreya taught these texts to a Sangha. So it's it's unclear when he says that it was a Sangha who wrote this. It's like, does he mean the one that physically wrote it down on paper? Because that's the only way to understand it.
I was so excited reading this. I was like, I'm finally going to figure out who Maitreya is. Is it this like future Buddha or what? And at the end, I'm like, I'm still
Hmm.
not clear on exactly who Maitreya is.
Well, the tradition views him as being the future Buddha and appearing to a Sangha and teaching him these texts, giving him these teachings, and a Sangha writing them down. And then a Sangha adding that homage at the beginning. I pay homage to Maitreya. Maitreya would not pay homage to himself, I don't think. So that's sort of the background for this text. I thought that it was a decent sort of context, way of painting the context for this text. And I thought that we could basically just dive in and read through the text in the remainder of this first class and get a taste of it. And then we'll spend the rest of the course going through it in detail, bit by bit. So, in Carl, our text that we have here by the Dharma Chakra Committee, the only drawback in my mind is that it doesn't actually present the root text separately, which is something that a lot of books do. They present the root text in the context of commentaries, and it's rare that you find books, authors, translators that do both, which in my opinion is the best thing to do, is to present the root text separately and then to present it embedded in the commentary by whoever you have commentaries of. But it has commentaries by Mipam, which is apparently a great commentary, and then a gentleman named Kempo Shenga, who will come back to these two characters later. But for this purpose of diving right into the text itself, I extracted it from Carl's wonderful book using his translation. And I spent quite a long time trying to understand the outline of this text and then embed it into this commentary so that we can see, into not the commentary, into the root text so that we can see what's going on. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so first thing we see is that it says the prose version. So this is not unusual that these ancient texts have two versions, a prose and a versified version that comes down to us through the ages. And this is true of a lot of the Buddha sutras as well. And many of the Buddha sutras have both. Like the Buddha will present things in a discourse fashion through up to a certain point, and then he'll summarize it and present the same information in verse. And it's a little questionable, like who did the verse summary or commentary or condensation? Was it the Buddha or somebody later? Anyway, the whole issue of the Mahayana Sutras is a challenging one as well. So here we have the prose version from Carl's book, and I've given the translation of the title without the Sanskrit. I probably well, here's the Sanskrit. So the title in Indian language is Dharma Dharmata Vibhanga, and that's often given as one word, but it has like three parts to it, right? Dharma, Dharmata, and then Vibhaga is the distinction or the distinguishing or separation. He gives the Tibetan and then the English. The homage, I pay homage to youthful Manjushri, since something is to be relinquished after being understood, and something else to be made fully perceptible. Therefore, this treatise was composed out of the wish to distinguish these two through their defining characteristics. So here the implication is something to be relinquished as dharma, the relative nature of phenomenal appearance, and something to be made fully perceptible is dharmata. Whereas the other translation implied the way I interpreted it earlier, which is an interesting example of the way that these texts can be understood in multiple ways. The summary, all this is this meaning all this is summarized into two, that is, into phenomena and the nature of phenomena. What is characterized by phenomena is samsara. What is characterized by the nature of phenomena is the nirvana of the three yanas. Now, the nirvana of the three yanas is an interesting phrase that I don't quite have any comment on, really. Um, the nirvana of the three yanas, and given that this is an Indian Shastra text, those three yanas do not include Vajrayana. But this is Shravakayana, Pratyeka Buddhayana, and Bodhisattvayana. And so, technically speaking, those are three different ways of understanding nirvana. And so the presumption is that the author is saying that we're going to look at the ultimate nature of reality as it's viewed by or in those three yanas. First, we have phenomena, what appears as duality, and how it is designated. So, what appears as duality and how it is designated? It's designated by the mind. What appears to that mind and how the mind experiences it, designates it, like big, small, up, down, fundamental structure of our cognitive world. All of that is false imagination, which is the defining characteristic of phenomena. It's just conceptualization, imagination. The appearance of what does not exist is false. So this is a great phrase. The appearance of what does not exist is false. So from a logical point of view, if something that doesn't exist appears, you can say, well, it's falsely appearing because it doesn't exist. I think we can all agree on that. And then the next step is, well, what is it that appears? Appearance appears. Phenomena appear. That's what appears to the mind. And those are false. Phenomena are false. They are dependent upon the mind's perception of them, and they don't exist independent of the mind's perception. Being without reference in all respects, imagination is mere conception. Being without reference, so this is a little bit of sort of logical language, meaning that the terms that we're using, the words that we're using, the concepts that we're using, they don't refer to anything real. Appearances, those are false. So there's a word, appearance. We have a concept of what an appearance is, or what a dharma is. But that word, that concept doesn't refer to something that actually exists. It refers to what we experience, not what exists. What do we experience through concept, through imagination? That's the premise. The intrinsic nature of phenomena. So I used intrinsic because our text uses intrinsic. Our book that we have is distinguishing phenomena from their intrinsic nature, which I thought made it a little bit clearer. Because otherwise, this translation just says phenomena and the nature of phenomena. And it's not clear when you say nature of phenomena, is that the true nature of phenomena or is that the nature of relative phenomena? So the way that our text adds the word intrinsic, I thought was very helpful. So I added that to this little structural outline I inserted into this text. The defining characteristic of the nature of phenomena, the intrinsic nature of phenomena, is suchness, which lacks any distinction between apprehender and apprehended, perceiver and perceived, or between objects of designation and what designates them. So objects of designation are what we apprehend, what we perceive, and what designates them is the perceiver. The rationale, the mistakenness due to what does not exist appearing is the cause of afflictions or afflictiveness. The cause of samsara is mistaking what does not exist to exist just because it appears. We think, oh, it appears, it has to exist. That's the cause of samsara. Just like seeing illusory elephants and so on, also because what exists is not seen either. So the author slips this in at the end here. What exists is not seen. So the true nature of reality, dharmata, is not seen. We don't see dharmata. We see appearances. These are neither the same or different. If any one of these two, non-existence and appearance, did not exist, mistakenness, unmistakenness, the author then lists the various pairs of ways of understanding these two. Afflicted phenomena, purified phenomena, would not follow. If either of the two did not exist, you couldn't have the other part of the pair. These two are neither one nor different because there is a difference as well as no difference in terms of existence and non-existence. Now there's a tongue twister for you, huh? I think the general import of this is that you can't say there's a difference because one of them does not exist. But you can't say there's no difference because um, one of them does exist. Hopefully, there's a question mark in our minds at this point, and that's what we'll spend the rest of the course clarifying. Further explanation of phenomena. So not the intrinsic nature rather, but phenomena. The realization of phenomena through 6 points is unsurpassable. The defining characteristic, the rationale, being neither one nor different, their matrix, what is common and not, and the non-existence of the appearance of apprehender and apprehended. Mystery movie, novel. The first three, the defining characteristic, rationale, not being one or different, are as in the brief introduction above. We just went through those in this paragraph. The basis, their matrix, consists of what cycles in what? What cycles in samsara? That's the basis, that's the matrix. The world of sentient beings and the container. Container is this environment that we experience called samsara. There's the container and the contain, the environment and its inhabitants. The matrix consists of the inhabitants, the basis, sentient beings. The world of the container consists of the cognizances that seem to be in common. The container, we seem to have the same experience of our environment, of our world. The world of sentient beings consists of what is in common and what is not in common. The basis that is in common and not in common, birth, behavior, care, defeat, qualities, and faults cause each other and therefore are in common by virtue of mutual domination. Mutual cause and condition, these factors are in common. All sentient beings experience these. The abode, the cognizance, the karma, the happiness, suffering, death, and transition, birth, bondage, liberation, are not in common by virtue of not being in common. You got to have a sense of humor about this, right? So what is in common is the container, is our environment. We all agree, oh, that's a chair, that's a table, that's red, that's yellow, that's blue. But what differs is our own experience, our own karma, our own happiness and suffering. The non-existence, what appears as something apprehended that is in common and external, is the cognizance that is the apprehender. There's no reference apart from the cognition. So this is mind. This is the understanding of of the statement, everything is mind. What appears is what we apprehend. And that is in common. We apprehend a common existence, a common reality, and external. And that is the cognizance, that is the apprehender. The apprehender apprehends its own cognizance. So we'll spend some time on that point later on. But there's no referent that is apart from cognition because such is in common. There's no external referent to the apprehended. The apprehended, the objects, the reference that are consciousness that are not in common in the minds and so on of others do not mutually serve as objects for the two types of cognizance that are the apprehenders, while being or not being in meditative equipoise respectively. So here, this whole section here is totally confusing and complicated. And we'll just like go read through it at this point as like a first pass. And I think we'll probably make a number of passes at these two paragraphs. Because for those who are non-meditative equipoise, their own conceptions appear, and because for those who are, it is a reflection of the mind of another that appears in the form of the experiential object of samadhi. That in particular is confusing. That those who are in samadhi experience the reflection of another, of the mind of another. That's confusing. If what appears as the apprehended does not exist, it is established that what appears as the apprehender does not exist either. Those are mutually interdependent, apprehender and apprehended. So if what is apprehended is not existent, then the apprehender is non-existent. Therefore, the realization of the non-existence of the appearance of apprehender and apprehended is established. For arising without beginning is established. That insertion of this one little sentence, for arising without beginning is established, is presented as like the reason for this other part about uh, apprehended and apprehender not really existing. So again, we'll spend a bunch of time on this, what that means. But basically, uh, arising never began. There's no beginning point to samsara. While the two are not established at all, they are commonly known. Even though they're not established, they're not real. Everybody knows and experiences them. Then we have the further explanation of the intrinsic nature of phenomena in 6 points. So we have the characteristic. The realization of defining characteristic is, as in the brief introduction, we saw that earlier, the matrix consists of all phenomena and a collection of the words of the sutra collections that represent this traditional way of classifying the Buddha's teachings as having 12 branches. That's the matrix. So earlier, the matrix of phenomena was sentient beings. The matrix of the true nature of phenomena is the Dharma teachings, the presentation of reality. Penetration is the entire path of preparation that consists of the proper mental engagement, which relies on the sutra collection of the Mahayana. So here we have the progression. We have ground, the sort of overall structure, framework, the characteristic. There's Dharma and Dharmata. And then the ground is the teachings, the ground in terms of the nature, intrinsic nature of phenomena is as as suchness is presented in the teachings of Buddha. That's the ground. The path is the path of preparation. Among the 5 paths: accumulation, preparation, seeing, familiarization, and without learning, beyond learning. The path is identified as two, the path of preparation that consists of the proper mental engagement that relies on the sutra collection of the Mahayana. And then the result of that is contact, the realization and experience of suchness that occurs on the path of seeing, because the correct view is attained, and which is by virtue of direct training. So here's a presentation of the path of Dharma, the two uh, crucial paths of the five paths. And remember, the five paths are not alternative paths to one destination, but are really stages on one path to the destination called enlightenment. Recollection is the entire path of familiarization that eliminates the stains of what consists of the factors concordant with enlightenment, just as one has made contact with it. So familiarization, familiarizing ourselves to what has been seen on the path of seeing the true nature of reality by eliminating the stains accumulated from beginningless time. The karmic impressions, arrival, the arrival at its nature by virtue of suchness having become without stains, being cleansed of all stains, in all respects nothing but suchness appears or remains, which is the perfection of the fundamental change. So that's the goal. So we have the context, the characteristic, we have the ground, and then we have two stages of the path. I'm sorry, three stages of the path. We have path of preparation, seeing, and familiarization, and then we have the arrival. So that that progression maps out a change. And this is one of the main quandaries in the Buddhist tradition is how can there be enlightenment if enlightenment, the state of enlightenment is unchanging, unproduced, how can one achieve or attain enlightenment? How can one go from unenlightened to becoming enlightened? That implies a change. That implies something caused. And so that fundamental contradictory situation is at the crux of all of the Buddha Dharma. And then is basically the third part of this text, talking about that fundamental change through 10 points. The nature, um, what is the nature of the adventitious afflictions and suchness? The realization of the entity refers to the change of the cognizance. So what is it that changes? Our understanding changes. That is the common container into suchness. The change of the Dharma Dhatu of the Sutra collection into suchness. This odd way of likening the teachings of the Dharma to one's experience of the progression of the Dharma. The change of the cognizance, that is the Dhatu of sentient beings, which is not in common, into suchness, the realm of sentient beings. The individuals, they're persons that change into Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The latter one refers also to Shravakas and Buddhas, Pratyeka Buddha's distinct features of the pure realms, and the distinctive features of having attained the three bodies of a Buddha. What are the requirements for this transformation? Aspiration prayers, the focal, and then the distinctive feature of the focal object. So when we talk about cultivating and understanding the view, the language implies that it's the view of something. So that's the focal object of the view. What do we have a view of? So this text continues that language, like what is the focal object of our view? The basis of that transformation, there's fourfold focal objects. The Mahayana teaching, the aspiration for it, gaining certainty in it, and the completion of the accumulations. And those fourfold objects, which were just listed, are then explained in a little bit more detail. Each one having subdivisions. The characteristics has 4 points. The practice has 4 points. So these are the four focal objects of relinquishment of characteristics. Correct yogic practice, defining characteristics, which has 3 parts. And an interesting quote, the defining characteristic is clearly taught as is described in the sutras. So here we have Maitreya quoting the sutras, non-conceptual wisdom is ungraspable, etc. It is also by virtue of appearance, because all phenomena are seen like the center of space, and because all conditioned phenomena are seen like illusions, and so on. And the last of the four focal objects is the fourfold benefit. Supreme state of bliss, mastery over seeing, mastery over instruction, in addition to the Dharmakaya. And what is the basis? The basis also, so the basis had fourfold focal objects, and then the basis had um, uh, an explanation of complete understanding, the basis of complete understanding, which has 4 types: remedies, the antidotes to obstructions, the understanding of the characteristics of reality, the understanding of how features are distinct, are distinguished from one another, while in the realm of the non-conceptual. And then the complete understanding of functionality. What is functionality in the realm of dharmata? And then there's the stage of directing the mind in a mistaken manner, then the correct manner, and the progression in that. And then we have the application of the directing of the mind. So first, like understanding, how do we direct the mind towards the view? And then we apply that directing of the mind towards the view. What are the problems that we might encounter in that process? What are the flaws? What are the strains? And then when we do it correctly, what are the benefits? A fourfold benefit, which we don't see listed. The summary of the text is one should understand. These are the summary of the 10 topics. These are the 10 points of how to realize the fundamental change. There's some examples. That non-existent phenomena appear corresponds to, for example, illusions, dreams, and so on, where things seem to exist but are not existent, but they seem at the time, like while we're dreaming, it seems completely real. So that's examples of non-existent phenomena, and examples of the fundamental change, or that it corresponds to space, gold, water, and so on. And the commentaries will explain these, but the easiest one is gold, that has the essence of gold, but as we know, has to be put through a process of refining in order to actually make it into what we call gold, which is a very good analogy for what enlightenment is. When we say that there's a process of enlightenment, but that nothing changes, it has that contradictory quality, and that's similarly with gold. This concludes the text, and then the colophon, translated by Shantibhadra into Tibetan, and then it's corrected later on by these other gentlemen in Tibet. May there be benefit. Mangalam. So, hopefully that wasn't off-putting, but that's a quick dive into this somewhat abstruse text, and from there, hopefully we can unpack this in the remaining weeks of the course through the various commentaries. So if all goes as my plan, which is not always possible, as we know, we'll go through some materials from Karl Brunholzl. I'll walk through the syllabus real quickly. So tonight we looked at the introduction by Trungpa Rinpoche, and we looked at the prose version. I didn't go into the five texts, so we'll do that next time, just like briefly. Uh, the five texts of Maitreya. And then we'll look at, there's this sutra text called the Dharani of Entering the Non-Conceptuality, which is generally considered to be the sutra source for Maitreya's text, Dharma Dharmatava Bhanga, which is interesting. So we'll look, Carl has a translation of this sutra called a Dharani. There's different types of sutras, and this is of the type of Dharani. And then he has a wonderful overview or introduction of the five texts of Maitreya that I found on the internet somewhere. Um, and I've excerpted for the source book this part called The Contents of the Five Maitreya Texts. I'll give you the whole document, an overview of the five texts, because at the beginning he goes through the main teachings in those texts, which I thought we don't need to go through separately, because when you go through the text, you go through that same material. But anyway, we'll go through the different texts of Maitreya, which in doing that will present us with sort of like a framework for understanding this text, because this text is again considered to be like, as Trungpa Rinpoche says, the oral commentary on the other shastras, on the other four, that actually can be put into one's practice. We'll see how realistic that is. Then we dive into Carl's introduction to this text. He has a summary of the text, and then he goes through some of the major aspects of the text, primarily what this term in Sanskrit is, ashraya. I should put in the H, ashraya parivriti. That's Sanskrit for fundamental change. And so that is the main thing that goes on in this text, is this fundamental change. And then so that part of his introduction is very long, so I pull out the beginning of it, where he goes through that concept in this text that we're looking at. And then when he presents, he goes through zillions of other texts. Carl is just an amazing scholar. And then there's a conclusion of what fundamental change is. And then he goes into non-conceptual wisdom, which is very much the sort of culmination of this text, is what is non-conceptual wisdom. And then we'll go through the translation we have in stages in the Dharma Chakra committee's translation. And then if we're all still alive, we can look at a commentary by Vasubandhu, the full commentary by Vasubandhu that Carl presents in his text. And so go through the text. So tonight we read through it quickly. Then we'll have introductory material about it, primarily by Carl, actually exclusively by Carl. And then we'll go through the commentaries by Maitreya, by Nippon and Kempo Shenga, and then by Vasubandhu. So we'll go through it like 4 times. So hopefully the fourth time will be a charm. Comments, suggestions, questions, thoughts, reactions.
How many years is this going to take?
Isn't that amazing? Like, the text is so short, right? It's really quite amazing. Yeah, it's a very short book. But yeah, so I added, you might say I added all this complexity to it by adding all these other readings. And couldn't we just read this book? But I guess tonight's exercise was me trying to like convince you that just reading the short version of the text with a short commentary does not quite bring it home in the way that I think would be helpful to us. So,
Yeah, yeah, you have to read it over a couple of times. You just can't. Yeah, I get it.
and we've identified some of the parts that are very complicated and hard to understand, and the essential parts to focus on, and so forth. So we'll see how it goes. Suggestions welcome, though. Anything else? Well, thank you very much for joining in on this. I'm looking forward to it. And let's do the dedication of merit. By this merit may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death from the ocean of samsara. May I free all beings by the confidence of the golden sun of the great east. May the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thank you, everyone. Neil.
Hey, thank you very much.
Hi.
Hey, it wasn't meant to be erased, I don't think. Sorry.
I
Great to
think
see
it
you.
must be a system glitch because I had that happen twice this morning where my hand was raised when I didn't do anything to raise it. I was like 4 feet away from the computer. So I think a new Zoom version must have built in some random hand raising.
It could also just be my incompetence, Cynthia, but you never know.
We have
Uh, could be.
this, I don't know if it's new to this version of Zoom, but this feature where I can see all three of you who are having the conversation, Neil, Cynthia, and Derek. And I didn't know about that. Plus, you can switch, if you don't want to see the text, you could switch it so I could see Derek and then I have the text open next to me so I could see Derek, talking.
Right.
That's cool. Thank you,
Know about it.
Barbara.
Yeah, there are
Yeah,
yeah, there's some new
I
things.
don't know.
it's
What?
called immersive.
Immersive? Okay.
Is that the multi-speaker view? I think that's what that
But
is.
yeah, I have multi-speaker, but the other thing is a different
Yeah,
feature.
that's on the other one is on the left. You can, yeah, hit a
And it
button.
only shows up when someone is sharing the screen. So
Yeah, it's very
Wow.
nice. That's actually a very nice feature.
yeah, because
I clicked on that by mistake. It was like a tab up top. I was like, where'd the text go? But I
Yeah,
had
that's
it open
right.
for a year. And
You
I was
got
like,
lost.
oh, yeah.
Interesting. That's neat. Yeah, it used to only be speaker and gallery. Anyway, thank you very much. Great to see you all. Have a great week. Take
Thank you, Derek.
care.
Thank you. Good night.